One more thing I found, because, we've been talking about my files, and I've been going through stuff that I'd been stacked in the drawer, etc. And it's all over the place. But some of this stuff I realized because I've moved a number of times. These two things right here may never have left this house for 20 years until we had everything remodeled. But it ties into what some of the things that we've been talking about in our discussions this season about the Eddie Gilbert Dark Side of the Ring, the Eddie Gilbert Wrestling News File, the different ways that Eddie, was preparing for getting in the business, etc. And I found two letters from him from 1982. Would you like to hear a couple of excerpts?
Yeah.
Or excerpts real quick?
No, the previous excerpts are really good. So I want to hear
those excerpts. I'll tell you what.
82. So 81, him and Ricky Morton were teaming up in Memphis. 83, or the end of 82, he goes to the WWF. Was he in Puerto Rico or was he already in WWF?
Well, hold on. Because remember, did I tell the story when we talked about the Dark Side of the Ring episode with Evan Husney, or when we talked about it afterwards when it aired? But remember the Christmas time that Eddie and Tommy at the end of 1981, because Ricky Morton had already left territory. Eddie and Tommy Gilbert were teaming at the end of 81, and they got in the Christmas punch at the Louisville Gardens.
Oh, that's
right. You
right.
remember me telling you that story?
Christine Jarrett flipping out because the Gilberts got into the punch.
The Gilberts got in the spiked punch, right? Well, I found this and I looked at it. I said, my God, I don't even remember this ever existed. But this is a letter from Eddie, January 15th, 1982. And he always dated his letters, thank goodness. And it's a letter. It's not an email. That didn't exist. It's on notebook paper. And he wrote to give me his new address. That's when they went to Kansas City, or at least he did. Tommy may have gone somewhere else, but Eddie went to Kansas City for a brief time. And he gave me his new address because I need some more black and white 8x10s like he gave me before. I was still the photographer, right? So, and Eddie's always won pictures for publicity. But he said, I really hated what happened in Louisville that night, but I just had to let my feelings out. When I saw this, I was like, oh my God.
Oh, wow.
I forgot. He said, if you just knew how they treated my dad all the time he wrestled there and then started on me, I think you would have to blow your top also. I talked to your mother about it one night right before I left. I hope you or her don't hold nothing against me and my dad for all of that.
Whoa. So this is interesting because all those stories about Eddie and the Office having issues in Memphis, you started hearing them from like 88 on. This is him before he ever booked or did anything. He flipped out. What happened? What do you remember?
Well, remember I said when they had originally it started with, as I recall, being the ringside photographer, one of the ringside fans heckling fucking Eddie for being the young baby-faced little kid that looked like he was 12 years old with Tommy. And Tommy got mad. And as I said, the manager of the Louisville Gardens, what was her goddamn name? Not germane to the story now. Or maybe it was Alan T. One of the administrators of the Louisville Gardens had brought punch in a little Christmas, because it was right before the holidays, set up in the back, and somebody had spiked the punch. And Tommy and Eddie had gotten the punch. And Tommy was picking at the ringside fan, and it ended up, and they're the baby faces. Tommy and Eddie both jumped down and went into ringside. There was a shoving, and the cops got them back. And then they went in the back, and there was some yelling and hoopla going on. But at that time, I couldn't go down to locker rooms. I didn't know the full effect of it. But that's when Teeny afterwards had said, oh, they pitched a fit. And, but apparently Eddie had apologized to my mom at the show. I can't remember that. This is 45 years ago.
Well, that's interesting too. I mean, Eddie is a little different than other wrestlers because he was your contemporary and you knew him before he was a wrestler and you guys both went to the WFIA and everything. But Did other guys know your mom? The fact that he apologized to your mom and spoke to your mom about all this is interesting.
Well, yeah, only because she was there constantly. If we were at Evansville, I was at ringside taking pictures. She was selling the pictures at the merchandise stand. The same thing in Louisville. We were out in and out the back door carrying the stuff. They interacted constantly. Lexington. I think I'm not going to rule out that Eddie might not have taken a couple trips with us because my mom, as I've told you, like me, I don't ride in the car with anybody else driving. My mom didn't ride in the car with anybody else driving. So if I went and she went, she was driving. So no, there was all kinds of interaction. Oh, but hold on, there's something else. But the PS on this letter is tell Lawler I said hello. Yeah.
See, that's fucking funny. Oh my God.
Yeah, right. But my new phone number is 816 blah, blah, blah. Your friend Eddie Gilbert. PS, tell Lawler I said hello.
The way that was phrased about how the office is, how did he say how the office is treated his dad? What was the exact thing he said there?
If you just knew how they treated my dad all the time he wrestled there and then started on me. But
what do you think that is? I mean, is that basically a kid hearing his dad come home and vent about the office and then
I'm wondering, did Tommy have some of the was it paranoia or conspiracy theory or whatever that Eddie was talked about having in Dark Side? Did he pass it on? Because Tommy was a huge babyface here for years. And I don't know that there was ever a problem with him and Jarrett because he worked in Jarrett's territory as much after the split as he had worked for Goulas beforehand. Eddie Marlin and Tommy Gilbert had been tag team partners. They were the top babyface tag team, and Eddie was in the office by that point in time, being Jarrett's father-in-law. I wasn't involved behind the scenes early enough to see how Tommy had been treated, quote unquote, ever since he'd wrestled there, which had been 15 years at that point, on and off.
And then the way Eddie said, started in on me. What does he mean? Does he mean like from the moment he debuted? Yeah.
I don't know.
He got a push right away in 79. He got a push in 81. But they didn't push him past Lawler. I mean, could that be the issue?
Well, no. At this point in time, no. This is January 1980. Eddie's a month older than I am, so he was at this point 20 years old. No, that would. But I don't know. But I got another one here. Hold on here. Listen to the other fucking side of the coin. September 7th, 1982. Because we talked about he had a history of being down about stuff, but then being up about stuff, right? He said, first, thank you again for getting the photos done for me. I appreciate it, blah, blah, blah. But now listen to this. 2 hours, and I'd forgotten I'd got this also. 2 hours after I got off the phone with you, George Napolitano called me and told me that I was to call Vince McMahon.
Oh, wow.
At the Holiday Inn, the same place Barnett and the Alliance meeting was held. So, of course, I called his room. The first thing and this is senior, by the way, because this is September of 82. The first thing he told me was he had an assignment for me to go to Japan to work with Tiger Mask. And remember, that happened. Did it not? Or did they had a match in the Garden?
No, it wasn't the Garden, I don't think. I think it may have been Philadelphia. They wrestled when Tiger Mask came on a tour of the WWF in 1983, wrestled against Eddie. I don't remember Eddie going to Japan, though.
Did he go to... So it was when Tiger Mask came here, but I thought they did that in the Garden.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember that match in the Garden. I could be wrong, though.
Nevertheless, they had the match somewhere. But he says, then he asked me if I would be interested in coming to work in New York. Boy, was I in shock. He said he was impressed with me at the meeting. Did he go to the NWA meeting?
Yeah, I had heard that before. I don't know if it was that year or the year before. It must have been that year, although
It
he's
was
saying,
that year.
yeah, because George Napolitano said call him in his room at the Holiday Inn.
Yes. Well, then that's why he says same place, Barnett. An alliance meeting was held. Eddie
Yeah.
went to the alliance meeting.
And that's the
He
year
told me
before. And that's the year before Barnett and Vince Sr. and Vince Jr. resigned. Because that was
Yes.
September 83, right?
Yes. So there you go. But he told me to call him back this week to set something up. Now, I've still got to call Barnett back. So apparently he was going to go. I have probably two of the biggest offers in my life. I've still got to call Barnett back, so I don't know what to do. And we know what he did do. But so apparently Barnett wanted him to come to Atlanta at the same time.
What was the date?
September 7, 1982. Well, because on page 2, at any rate, thanks again for sending the photos to Atlanta for me. So that.
And think about it. 3 months later, Barnett got pushed out by Ole. Because if Eddie had gone there, who knows who knows if Eddie Gilbert and Ole Anderson at that point would have coexisted well together?
Yeah. But the other way it was, they ended up together in the end because Barnett went north.
I thought you meant 1990. They all ended up working together.
No, but
yeah.
Okay, and also, and here's the last bit, but also congratulations on your future manager duties. I just done my first 2 weeks of TV, right? Keep in mind what we were talking about if I get back anytime in the future. I don't remember what we were talking about, but
managing
again, this
him.
was 43 years ago.
Would he have ever talked to you about managing him back then?
That may have been a thing. I don't know. Anyway, take care and tell your mom hello. Also, Lawler, Miss Christine, and Randy Hales if you see him. There you go. Wow. I had not even remembered that these two letters existed.
That first letter, again, I hate to go back to it, but I'm fascinated by the idea that, you know, all the paranoia that Eddie had, and people attributed it to different things, from drug use, and I don't think it was just that, to his height in the business, to his injury. But you never really hear a lot about, you know, was that just him? You know, was it Tommy? Was it Tommy and the way Tommy talked about the business in the car and talked about people?
Remember and again, I didn't know in 1979, let's say, that I was going to be needing to be dissecting people's intentions in this fashion in front of worldwide consumption, 50 fucking years later or whatever. But Teenie always said the Gilberts are moody. And that in her polite Southern way, the Gilberts are moody. But Tommy was used very well and was always, at the end, I can't remember what year Tommy was born, but when I managed him when he was the masked ace of spades in 1983, when he was shortly to go to Louisiana and become a referee. It was the end of his career. No, they didn't put him on top then, but he'd been a fucking main event guy on and off for the Goulas, Welch, and Jarrett companies for ages and eons.
And I don't know if he was going to get that kind of push anywhere else, to be honest.
No, he did. He was an excellent worker. That in the 70s, in some of the territories, he went to West Texas, worked for the Funks, and I think he had a run in Florida at one point where he could hang in the ring, but he didn't have the promo to be a top baby face unless the hometown native of Lexington, Tennessee helped him in the Tennessee territory. And then because he was just like one of them, their fucking brother-in-law or whatever the fuck. And what a baby face. But he could be a heck of a fucking heel. And I think in another territory, he could probably got a heck of a lot of heat just from the shit that he did in the ring. But that was his primary. Baby face in Tennessee was his primary calling.
I drove him a couple times when he worked for Dennis for those Eddie Gilbert memorial shows, and we were all staying.
What, crazy?
No, very funny. I like Tommy. He was a very nice guy. Yeah. I got to see, if it wasn't his last match, it must have been one of them, him against Dory Funk Jr.
Oh, well, and the Gilberts and the Funks, got along, and the Gilberts all looked up to and respected the Funk family. But it's your show.
Were those all your Eddie letters? I mean, not to ask you to go through more of them right now, but did he keep sending you letters through the years?
Well, no, there's a few other things that I glanced at that didn't appear to be too earth shaking either. Here's my new address. And there's my new address in Puerto Rico, but not the 1995 and fucking 1981 or whatever it was, too. And thanks for the picture. I've got to know when Ricky Morton and Ken Lucas went to, God damn it, was it Alabama or Oklahoma? They kept getting their pictures from me because poor Lil Al Vavasseur had been run out of the business by then. And I kept notes that, for like Ricky would say, thanks for the pictures, Jimmy, here's your check. P.S. Stick it in your ear. Just shit like that I'll assemble in a book one day. Would the people like to see a book of just my ephemera? Yeah. Just the shit that I have collected just reproduced over the course of 50 years?
If done well, if done nicely, if presented in the proper context, yes.
Well, what about if just shoved into your hand on a street corner in Las Vegas and with the other hand out saying, give me a quarter?
That sounds like a lot of the authors in professional wrestling nowadays. No, I don't know. I think people would love to see that kind of stuff. I think people love, especially correspondence, to just see one way or in some cases two-way back and forth communication. It's cool. And, here's an example. It kind of opens a door in terms of how history happened. It's not a major part of history, but Eddie Gilbert writing to you to say that George Napolitano put him in touch with Vince McMahon, and that's what led him to going to the WWF. That's news. Well, not news, but that's history. So I think it's really cool.
Well, and also the thing is, I've seen that as generations go by, back in the old days, you have more of the shit that people sent to you and not a lot of the shit that you sent to them. But recently, it's because you've either you made a carbon copy or then faxed it or then emailed it. You've got the shit you sent to other people, but you might not have the shit they sent to you. So I'm trying to sort this out in the deck. I've only got, 6 decades to work with. So I'm trying to kind of narrow it down and get it filed there.